The last report from the Drevin corridor arrived in pieces. Not metaphorically. The data packet itself was fragmented. Transmission equipment on the relay station had been partially destroyed before the automated systems managed to compress and fire the signal. Admiral Sova reconstructed it manually, feed by feed, and when the full picture assembled itself across the war room display, she stood very still for a long time. 14 systems, now 15. She pulled up the casualty figures, then closed them before the numbers finished loading. She already knew. She had been knowing for 8 months, in the slow and grinding way that commanders learn things they cannot afford to feel. The council chamber on orbital station Urundel held 11 seats. 3 of them were empty, the representatives of worlds that no longer existed as functioning governments. Nobody had officially removed the chairs. It felt too much like admission. Sova entered from the command corridor and took her place at the head of the briefing arc. Counselor Neth was already present, fingers folded, expression arranged into the particular shape of a politician who has decided to be difficult. Ambassador Drayle sat across from him, older, quieter, watching Sova with the careful eyes of someone who had already guessed what she was about to say. She said it anyway. The Vreth Dominion's advance fleet crossed the Kelvar threshold 6 hours ago. At their current rate of movement, Drevin IV has 30 days, possibly less. Neth's jaw tightened. Our projections last month said 90. Last month their bioships hadn't yet incorporated the countermeasures they copied from our third fleet engagement. Sova brought up the tactical overlay. The red markers were not subtle. They adapted to our dispersal pattern in 4 hours. 4. Our engineers spent 11 months developing that formation. The chamber was quiet. Drayle said, "What do we have left in the Drevin region?" 12 ships, against a Vreth advance force of 40, with their main armada, over 200 vessels, holding position at the edge of the Dominion's border. Waiting. Waiting for what? Neth asked. For us to commit everything we have left to defending Drevin IV. Then they advance behind their forward fleet and we have nothing in reserve. Neth spread his hands. Then we don't commit. We cede Drevin IV and use the time to. Cede Drevin IV. Drayle's voice was flat. 400 million people are already lost if we throw our remaining fleet at a battle we cannot win. Neth looked at Sova. Tell him I'm right. Sova said nothing for a moment. Outside the chamber's viewport, the stars held their positions with complete indifference. You're not wrong, she said finally. Tactically, the math does not favor defense. Neth nodded. But I didn't come here to talk about Drevin IV specifically. Sova closed the tactical display. I came to talk about the option we haven't discussed, the one this council has been avoiding for 3 months. The silence changed texture. Drayle said quietly, humanity. Neth stood up so fast his chair scraped. Absolutely not. Sit down, counselor. They were quarantined from galactic space for a reason. A single human gunship obliterated the entire Fareth pirate fleet, not scattered it, not defeated it, obliterated it. 14 ships, in one engagement, and they did it casually. Do you understand what I mean when I say casually? Their captain filed the after-action report in the same tone someone might use to describe clearing an obstruction from a roadway. That pirate fleet had terrorized 6 systems for a decade, Drayle said. We couldn't stop them. That is precisely my point. Sova let them go for another minute. Then she put the casualty numbers on the display, not the projections, the real ones, the cumulative total from 22 months of war. Both of them stopped talking. I've run every other option, she said. There are no other options. The Vreth adapt to everything we build, everything we design, every tactic we develop. Our technological ceiling is not high enough. We need something they haven't seen, something they cannot predict. She paused. Humanity has been fighting wars for 10,000 years. They have been fighting each other. Every variation, every nightmare, every possible configuration of conflict. They have lived through it and survived it and adapted to it. Whatever the Vreth can adapt to, humanity has already faced something worse. Neth sat down slowly. The vote was 5-3, with 3 abstentions. Drayle composed the message himself. He kept it short. He suspected humans respected brevity. He explained the war, the losses, the specific problem of Vreth bioadaptation, and ended with a straightforward request for military assistance. He did not expect a fast reply. The response came back in 11 minutes. It read, "Will send the Ardent Grave. ETA 6 days. Please have all engagement records ready for review upon arrival." Drayle stared at the message for a long time. He had expected negotiations, conditions, demands for political concessions, for territory, for the lifting of the quarantine as a precondition. Just a ship name, an arrival time, a request for homework. He pulled up what records the coalition had on human vessels. The Ardent Grave appeared in a border registry from 91 years ago. No other data. Whatever it was old. He wasn't sure if that was reassuring or not. Outside, the stars continued their indifferent watch. Somewhere in the dark, a human warship was already moving. The sensors picked it up 40 minutes before visual confirmation. Lieutenant Varon, on watch aboard the coalition flagship Resolute Dawn, initially flagged it as an anomaly. The FTL signature didn't match any known drive profile in the database. He ran the scan 3 times before he accepted that the object dropping out of faster-than-light travel was, in fact, a ship. One ship. He called Admiral Sova to the bridge, without fully understanding why his hands were unsteady when he reached for the comm. By the time Sova arrived, the Ardent Grave had decelerated to approach speed and was holding position 3 kilometers off the Resolute Dawn's port side. The bridge crew had gone quiet in the way that large groups of people go quiet when something enters a room that changes the air. The ship was long. That was the first thing. Long and dark, with a hull that had been repaired so many times in so many different ways that it resembled geological strata, layers of different metals, different composites, different eras pressed together into something that should not have cohered but did. Sensor sweeps came back confused. The hull absorbed certain frequencies, scattered others. The weapons' signatures were plural and strange. The analysts counted at least 11 distinct systems before they stopped counting. It had no designation markings visible from this angle. It didn't broadcast an identification signal. It simply arrived and waited, as though it had done this before and found introductions unnecessary. Sova opened a channel. "Ardent Grave, this is Admiral Sova of the Coalition Fleet. Please confirm identity and commanding officer." A pause, then, "Ardent Grave confirms. Captain Rael Das commanding. Admiral, we'd like to come aboard your vessel for the briefing. We've reviewed the data you transmitted but have some questions." The voice was unremarkable, measured. Sova had expected something that matched the ship, ancient, heavy, strange. Instead, it sounded like a man who slept well and woke early. "Confirmed, Docking Bay 4. Captain Rael Das was not a large man. This was the first thing Sova registered when he came through the airlock, that he was compact, unhurried, with the kind of stillness that didn't come from calm but from long practice at containing something. He was in his late 40s by human reckoning. His face held the particular quality of someone who had made a series of decisions he didn't regret but would carry regardless. Behind him came Lieutenant Oren Fall, younger, lean, with a data tablet already open and a set of eyes that moved across the hangar bay in the steady, cataloging way of someone who habitually identified exits. Sova greeted them with the formal coalition gesture, a closed fist over the sternum. Das mirrored it precisely. He had done his research. "Admiral, thank you for the engagement records. They were thorough. You've had 6 days to review 22 months of battle data." "We didn't sleep much." He said it without complaint as a simple logistical fact. "I have questions if you have time now." She had expected pleasantries. Perhaps a request for crew quarters resupply, some preliminary discussion of terms. Instead, he was already pulling up a display on Fall's tablet, a tactical map of the Third Fleet engagement annotated in a hand she didn't recognize. They walked to the briefing room. For the next 3 hours, Das asked questions. They were not the questions she expected. He wasn't interested in the Vreth's fleet numbers or their weapon specifications. He had already absorbed all of that. He wanted to know about behavior, about timing. He asked how long it took the Vreth to change formation after taking a hit on their port side versus their starboard side. He asked whether their adaptation field pulsed or sustained. He asked if anyone had noted whether the bioship slowed, even fractionally, in the interval between copying a weapon's signature and deploying the countermeasure. Sova found herself answering questions she had never thought to ask. At one point she said, "Our analysts reviewed these engagements exhaustively. They didn't find what you're looking for." Das looked up from the display. What were they looking for? A weakness, a tactical vulnerability. He nodded slowly. That's the wrong question. He turned back to the display. I'm looking for a habit. Fall had been building something on the secondary screen, a timing model, Sova realized, overlaying response intervals from 17 separate engagements. Patterns were emerging that her analysts had never mapped because they had been focused on the outcomes rather than the intervals between decisions. She watched him work and understood, gradually and with some discomfort, that she was seeing something her civilization had never needed to develop. The Vreth had been fighting the coalition. Das had been fighting enemies who thought. At the end of the briefing, she asked the question she had been holding back. Why did Earth send one ship? Das was quiet for a moment. Outside the viewport, the ardent grave sat in the dark, patient and scarred. One ship is enough to test whether I'm right, he said. If I'm wrong, the cost is one ship and one crew. You've already lost enough. He paused. And if I'm right, one ship is enough to start. Sova looked at him for a long moment. Your crew, she said, do they know the odds? They volunteered. He said it simply, without drama, every one of them. She thought about that on the walk back to the bridge. She thought about the 11 seats in the council chamber, 3 of them empty. She thought about what it meant that this man had read 22 months of catastrophic defeat, and his first response was to look for a habit. When she reached the bridge, the ardent grave was still there in the dark. For the first time in a long time, Sova did not feel entirely alone in this war. The Vreth advance fleet arrived at the Dreven corridor 18 hours ahead of projection. Sova took that as confirmation of what Das had told her the night before. The Vreth had detected the ardent grave's FTL signature and accelerated their timeline. They were curious, or cautious. In her experience, those two things often looked identical until one of them got someone killed. 40 warships, each one a living system, hull plates that shifted and sealed in real time, weapons that were not installed but grown. The Coalition's 12 ships held a defensive line at the edge of Dreven IV's gravity well. Against 40, they were a gesture, a formality before the end. Then Das moved. The ardent grave pulled out of formation without a word of warning. Sova opened a channel, "Captain, your position," and Das's voice came back flat and even. "We discussed this, Admiral. Stay back. Watch the intervals." She wanted to give an order. She closed the channel instead. The ardent grave crossed the midpoint of the corridor alone, decelerating as it went, making no attempt at evasion. It was, Sova realized with something close to horror, presenting itself, offering itself as a target to a fleet of 40 warships in the way that something either suicidal or completely confident would. The Vreth fleet commander hailed on an open frequency. The translation came through clipped and cold, a demand for identification and immediate surrender, standard Vreth protocol before they destroyed something. Das did not respond to the hail. He fired. The first shot was a railgun slug, dense, fast, old technology by any civilization's measure. It punched through the forward plating of the nearest Vreth destroyer before the bioadaptation field had fully engaged. The ship listed, not destroyed, but damaged in a way that looked shocking simply because it so rarely happened. The adaptation field came up across the whole fleet simultaneously. Sova had seen it before. It was the moment every engagement turned, a shimmer across the Vreth formation, barely visible on sensors, and then whatever weapon had just fired became useless. The field learned the signature, built a counter, distributed it fleet-wide in seconds. She watched the Ardent Grave's next shot deflect, the railgun slugs scattering off a surface that had reconfigured to shed kinetic energy. And then DOS switched weapons. Not to a single alternative. The Ardent Grave's weapons profile on Sova's display cascaded, plasma cutters firing in tight rotational bursts, then microwave emitters, then something her system labeled only as unknown thermal directional that struck a Vreth cruiser's midsection and caused it to fold inward along its own heat-sensitive hull plating. The adaptation field stuttered. It was built to counter a threat profile, and the threat profile kept changing. 4 different weapon systems in 90 seconds. Then a 5th, kinetic impactors, not slugs but clouds of dense particulate fired at dispersal angles the Vreth field had no category for. A second destroyer went dark. Then a third, gutted along its engineering section by something that appeared to function on principles Sova's analysts were still arguing about in real time. The Vreth fleet began to respond, 40 ships turning toward the Ardent Grave, weapons cycling up, the bioadaptation field expanding and straining as it tried to build counters for half a dozen simultaneous threat signatures. And then DOS pulled back. Not in retreat, in reposition. The Ardent Grave decelerated hard, dropped below the engagement plane, came up at a new angle, a completely different attack vector, presenting a different aspect ratio to the Vreth targeting systems, firing again before the fleet could complete its turn. 2 more ships took damage. Sova realized she had been holding her breath. She released it slowly. The Vreth fleet reformed. She had seen this before too. The moment they consolidated, tightened formation, coordinated the adaptation field into a unified suppression envelope. It had ended every previous engagement. Once they consolidated, there was nothing left to do. The Ardent Grave stopped firing. For 11 seconds, nothing happened. Then the Vreth fleet began to move. Backward. Not a tactical reposition, a withdrawal. They were pulling away from the Dreven corridor, retreat vectors that her navigation officer confirmed were taking them out of engagement range entirely. The bridge of the Resolute Dawn was completely silent. Sova's second officer said, very quietly, "They've never done that." "No," Sova said, "they haven't." DOS's voice came over the channel. He sounded the same as he had in the briefing room, unhurried, precisely calibrated. "Admiral, we've taken 3 hits. Hull integrity is holding. I'm sending you the engagement data alongside the adaptation field response intervals I recorded. You'll see a 0.3-second gap between signature acquisition and counter-deployment." Sova pulled up the data as he spoke. The gap was there, consistent across every weapon switch. 0.3 seconds where the field was between states, not defending against the old weapon, not yet defending against the new one. "That's the window," DOS said. "A third of a second," she said. "It's enough." A pause. "They'll come back with counters for everything they saw today, so we won't use any of it again." She heard Fall's voice in the background reporting something. Then DOS again. "We'll be ready." Sova looked at the tactical display. The Vreth fleet was still withdrawing, still running from a single ship that had taken 3 hits and refused to repeat itself. She thought about what it must look like from inside that fleet. An enemy that made no sense. An enemy that couldn't be predicted because it followed no pattern they could isolate. She thought about what DOS had said in the briefing room. Not a weakness, a habit. And she began, slowly, to understand what he was building. The debris field from the engagement drifted slowly across the mouth of the Dreven corridor. 3 Vreth destroyers and a cruiser reduced to cooling fragments, tumbling in loose formation as though they were still trying to hold a battle line. Sova came aboard the Ardent Grave alone. No aid, no security detail. She had decided, somewhere between the Resolute Dawn's airlock and the Ardent Grave's docking collar, that bringing an escort would communicate the wrong thing to a man like Das. The damage was visible the moment she stepped inside, scoring along the inner hull where heat had transferred through compromised plating. One corridor sealed entirely, a crew member stationed at the barrier tape with the particular expression of someone keeping themselves busy to avoid thinking about what was on the other side. The ship smelled of scorched metal and something chemical she couldn't identify. Fall met her at the junction and led her to the war room without small talk. His left arm was wrapped from wrist to elbow. He didn't mention it. She didn't ask. Das was standing at the central display when she entered. He looked the same as he had in the briefing on the Resolute Dawn, no more tired, no less contained. She wondered if that was discipline or if he simply processed things differently. "Admiral," he gestured to the display, "I was about to review the interval data. You're welcome to stay. I came to ask you something first." He turned from the display and waited. "What I watched out there," she said, "it looked like chaos. 14 weapon switches in under 4 minutes, attack vectors that didn't follow any doctrine I've studied, repositioning that abandoned every defensive principle our tacticians consider fundamental." She paused. "Our analysts think you were improvising, that you got lucky." Das said, "What do you think?" "I think you knew exactly what you were doing. I think every move was deliberate. I just don't understand the logic underneath it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up a different display, not the current engagement data, but something older. Historical records, she realized. Very old ones. Humanity's first organized conflicts were fought with handheld weapons on a single planet, he said. No shields, no energy weapons, just mass and edge and whoever could endure the most damage. He scrolled forward. Over thousands of years, the weapons changed. The scale changed. But the fundamental problem never changed. You are fighting an enemy who is also trying to kill you, who is also learning from what you do, who is also adapting. He looked at her. Every species that achieved interstellar travel solved this problem by eventually outpacing their enemies technologically. Build a better weapon. Build a faster ship. The enemy can't adapt if they're already dead. "That's coalition doctrine," Sova said. "Yes, and it works until you meet something that adapts faster than you can innovate." He closed the historical display. "Humanity never had that luxury. We fought each other. Our enemies were us, same biology, same cognitive architecture, same capacity for learning and adaptation. You could not simply out-technology a human enemy because they would steal your technology, copy it, improve it, turn it back on you. So we had to learn something different." "Unpredictability," she said. "More than that. Unpredictability is just randomness, and randomness can be adapted to statistically. What we learned was how to be genuinely novel, how to produce tactics, approaches, weapon applications that the enemy's model of you could not have generated." He paused. "The Vreth's adaptation field is extraordinarily sophisticated, but it is reactive. It builds a model of what you are and responds to that model. If you keep being what their model predicts, they will always be one step ahead. If you keep being something their model has never encountered, something that doesn't fit any category they've built, the model fails." Sova was quiet for a moment. "How many of those weapon systems had you used before today?" "In live combat, 3. The others were theoretical applications we developed but never had cause to field." He said it without pride, simply as fact. "And now the Vreth have seen them all." "Yes, which means we won't use them again." She stared at him. "You have more." Fall, who had been quiet in the corner, made a sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh before he converted it into a cough. Das said, "Admiral, the Ardent Grave has been in continuous service for 91 years. She has been rebuilt 11 times. The crew maintains a development program for weapons applications and tactical approaches specifically because we anticipate needing things we've never needed before. He looked at the display. We came here with 41 distinct weapon configurations. We used 7 today. Sova sat down. She hadn't intended to, but her legs made the decision without consulting her. Drail's voice came over her personal comm. He had been listening from the flagship, as she had told him he could. He said quietly, "Captain, I have to ask, how many wars has humanity fought, total, in your full history?" The war room was very still. Das looked at the display for a moment. When he gave the number, Drail didn't respond immediately. Sova found she couldn't think of anything to say either. Finally, Drail said, "Did you ever stop the fighting? Did you ever just stop?" Das said twice, a pause. It didn't last. He didn't say it with pride. He said it the way someone describes a scar, not ashamed, not boastful, just acknowledging something that is part of the shape of them now. The room held that for a moment. Then Sova's tactical alert fired. She looked at her display and felt the cold settle back into her chest where it had lived for 22 months. The Vreth main fleet had begun to move. All 214 ships, advancing from the Dominion border toward Arundel. Toward them. Das looked at the display over her shoulder. His expression didn't change. "They're scared," he said. Sova looked at him. "A scared enemy makes mistakes," he said. "Good." He turned back to the display. "Let them come." 214 ships came out of FTL, in a formation so precise it looked less like a military maneuver and more like a geological event. Sova had seen large fleets before. She had commanded them, lost them, watched them die piece by piece over 22 months of a war that only moved in one direction. But there was something different about this. The Vreth had brought everything. Not an advance force, not a punitive strike. The entire Dominion armada assembled in one place, pointed at one target. At the center of their formation hung the Gethara. It was not a ship in any conventional sense. It was a mass, roughly oblong, 4 kilometers from end to end. Its surface a slow-moving geography of biomechanical plates that shifted and realigned continuously. The Coalition had intelligence files on it dating back 9 years. In that time, it had destroyed 2 station clusters, 3 fleet formations, and a moon that a resistant population had attempted to use as a defensive fortification. It had never been seriously threatened. Sova stood on the bridge of the Resolute Dawn and looked at the tactical display and understood with complete clarity that the Coalition fleet could not stop what was coming. 12 ships plus the Ardent Grave against 214. The math was not close. Das had asked for one specific thing in the hour before the fleet arrived, that the Ardent Grave be placed at the center of the Coalition formation, not the flank, not in reserve, the center. She had agreed without fully understanding why. She understood now. The Vreth Armada's advance was not distributed. It was focused. Every ship angled toward the center of the Coalition line, toward the one vessel they had come specifically to destroy. They had brought 214 ships to kill the Ardent Grave. Das had made himself the most important target in the battle, and in doing so, he had given Sova's 12 ships the only thing they'd lacked in 22 months of fighting. A direction the enemy wasn't looking. The battle opened with the Vreth adaptation field expanding to cover the entire engagement zone, a coordinated suppression envelope that blanketed every Coalition weapon signature simultaneously. Sova had expected it. Her ships held fire and waited for Das to move. The Ardent Grave moved. What followed was something Sova would spend a long time trying to describe in her after-action report and eventually summarize in a single sentence. He taught us while he fought them. Every reposition the Ardent Grave made opened a firing angle for a Coalition ship that the Vreth formation hadn't covered. Every time Das drew the adaptation field's attention toward a new weapon signature, there was a 0.3-second window, the gap he had identified, The habit and Sova's ships learned to time their shots to it. Not perfectly, not consistently, but enough. The Ardent Grave took damage constantly. Sova watched the hull integrity readings drop in real time, 60%, 50, 43. Fall's voice came across the tactical channel in short bursts, directing fire solutions, adjusting the weapon's rotation, pulling new configurations from the list of 34 remaining systems, with the methodical efficiency of someone working through a prepared plan. Then the Gethara moved. It didn't engage the Ardent Grave. It turned, slowly and with enormous purpose, toward orbital station Urundel, the coalition's capital, the seat of the government, 300,000 people. Sova's fleet was deep in the engagement. Nobody could reach the Gethara in time. Her own ship was committed, surrounded, unable to disengage without collapsing the entire formation. She ran the intercept calculations 3 times in 4 seconds and got the same answer each time. Nobody could stop it. Her comm opened, Das's voice completely level. "I see it. Captain, you're at 40% hull integrity. You cannot." Admiral, a pause just long enough. "Watch the intervals." The Ardent Grave broke from the center of the formation at full thrust. It was wrong in every way. It abandoned the engagement. It left Sova's ships without the tactical anchor Das had been providing. It moved in a straight line directly toward the largest and most dangerous vessel in the Vreth Armada. Every doctrine Sova knew said it was a death run. A gesture. The kind of thing commanders did when they had run out of options and wanted to choose the manner of their ending. The Gethara's weapon system began to charge. Sova had seen the readings before in the intelligence files. 4 seconds from initiation to firing. Enough time to destroy a station. Not enough time for anything to stop it. The Ardent Grave fired at 2 seconds. Not one weapon. All of them. Every remaining configuration, simultaneously, in a simultaneous overlapping discharge that the adaptation field had never encountered because no vessel had ever attempted it. The field couldn't adapt to 14 signatures at once, couldn't find the sequence, couldn't build a counter for something that wasn't a pattern but a single catastrophic moment of totality. The Gethara went dark. Not destroyed completely, but dark. Systems down. The charge dissipated. The weapon did not fire. Silence fell across every open channel in the engagement zone. The Vreth Armada held its formation for 7 seconds. Sova counted them. Then the formation began to fragment, not a coordinated withdrawal, not a tactical repositioning. Ships peeling away independently, drives pushing to emergency thrust, the coherent armada dissolving into 214 separate vessels, all making the same individual decision. The Ardent Grave sat motionless in the debris field, where the Gethara's escorts had been. Hull integrity at 11%, fires visible on the exterior, one of the drive nodes completely dark. Das's voice came through the static, unhurried as always. "Target neutralized. Admiral, we're going to need a tow." Sova realized her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the console and breathed. Outside, the Vreth fleet was still running. They brought the Ardent Grave in on tow cables, 4 coalition tugs straining against its mass, and when it passed through Urundel's outer sensor range, the station's proximity alarms triggered automatically because the ship's hull profile had changed so drastically from the damage that the system no longer recognized it. Sova stood at the observation deck and watched it come in. At 11% hull integrity, it had no business being in one piece. The engineering teams who went aboard first sent back reports that used words like improvised and inexplicable, and in one case simply should not be holding. The Ardent Grave had been rebuilt so many times over 91 years that its internal structure had developed redundancies that weren't in any schematic. Crew modifications, field repairs, solutions to problems that had been solved, and then built over and then solved again, until the ship was less a designed object than an accumulated argument against dying. 31 crew members had not made it. Sova read their names from the casualty report once slowly, and then set it down. Das was in the medical bay when she came to see him, sitting upright, which the attending physician had apparently suggested against and been ignored. He had a laceration across his left temple, sealed but not yet fully treated, and the particular stillness of someone whose body was running on the far side of exhaustion. Fall was in the next bay. His arm, it turned out, had been broken during the engagement, not sprained. He had kept working for 4 hours on a broken arm and filed it in the damage report under crew injuries, 3rd line down. Sova sat across from Das, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "The Vreth fleet hasn't stopped moving," she said finally. "Our long-range sensors have them at the Dominion border, still retreating." She paused. "Word is spreading through their communication network about the Gethara." Das waited. "They're calling it a name. In translation, it comes out roughly as the ship that could not be killed." She looked at him. "They mean the Ardent Grave." He absorbed that without visible reaction. "It will slow them," she said, "maybe significantly. An enemy that fights without a pattern that cannot be adapted to, that destroyed the Gethara with a single broken ship." She stopped. "Fear is a weapon too. You said that. I understand it better now." "The war isn't over," Das said. "No, but something has shifted." She looked at her hands. "I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "All right." "Why did you come here?" She looked up. Not the official reason, not because Earth was asked, the real reason. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside the medical bay's small viewport, the stars held their positions with the same indifference they always had. "Someone was losing," he said, "and they asked for help." "That's it. That's enough." She studied him. "Your civilization was quarantined from galactic space for 60 years, locked out, told you were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent to be permitted among civilized species." She paused. "We did that to you, and when we needed you, you came anyway." Das said, "You didn't do it to me specifically." "Does that matter?" He thought about it seriously, which she appreciated. "No," he said finally, "but it doesn't change the answer either. Someone was losing, people were dying, we came." Drail's voice came over her personal calm. He had been waiting, she knew, had probably been waiting for an hour. He said, "Captain Das, I want to formally say on behalf of the coalition that we were wrong, about humanity, about what you are." Das said, "Ambassador, you had limited data." "We had data. We chose a conclusion that made us comfortable." A pause. "I don't intend to make that mistake again." The silence after that was different from the silences before it, less weighted. Something in it had been resolved. Sova said, "The Ardent Grave is finished," Das said, simply, no grief in it, just acknowledgement. "She flew her last. That's not a bad way for a ship to end." "Earth will want to know." "Earth already knows." He looked at the viewport. "They sent the message before the battle, contingency logistics." A pause. "They were already en route." Sova went still. "How many?" 17 when we left. More by now, probably. Earth doesn't like to underestimate." He almost smiled. It was the first time she had seen anything close to it on his face. They figured if one ship made the difference, 17 might end the war. Sova stood. She moved to the viewport and looked out at the station, at the docking arms and the slow traffic of coalition ships moving in and out of berth. She thought about the 15 lost systems, about the 3 empty chairs in the council chamber, about 22 months of a war that only moved in one direction. Behind her, Das said nothing. He was good at silence. Her comm chimed. Navigation officer, voice controlled and professional, and underneath that barely contained. Admiral. 17 FTL signatures just dropped out at the outer marker. Human ship profiles. They're hailing. Sova looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vreth Dominion was still running from a ship that no longer existed, from a crew that had come across the dark because someone was losing, and that was reason enough. She pressed the comm, put them through. The war wasn't over. But for the first time in 22 months, Sova knew which way it was going to move.